9. Chris McCandless. In 1992, hunters discovered the decomposed remains of an explorer named Chris McCandless inside an abandoned bus in Alaska. The rusted vehicle, which had long served as a temporary shelter for travelers passing through, was situated north of Denali National Park. There was an SOS note taped to the door, which he'd written at some point after he lost track of the date. An autopsy concluded that McCandless starved to death, but author John Krakauer, who wrote the famous book Into the Wild, suggested that the 24-year-old perished from eating the seeds of a wild potato species called Hedysarum alpinum. Krakauer believes the seeds contained a neurotoxin that inhibits important metabolic processes, essentially causing a person to starve. The discussion surrounding McCandless's death is ongoing and has attracted a cult following of sorts. But some people have taken a bigger interest in the abandoned bus his body was found in, which became a tourist attraction following the young man's widely publicized death. In 2020, state authorities deemed the dilapidated vehicle a public safety hazard and airlifted it elsewhere. The decision came following the death of Veronika Maikamava, a Belarusian tourist who drowned trying to cross the Teglanica River, as well as the rescue of numerous groups of hikers over the years. 8. Pripyat Bus Station. As you may already know, employees of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant and their families lived in Pripyat, Ukraine, before they were evacuated amid the nuclear disaster that occurred in 1986. Along with the many left-behind relics of daily life in the Soviet-era closed city is a seemingly futuristic bus station that's become paradoxically overgrown and reclaimed by wildlife. Located just off the main road near the city's entrance, roughly 93 miles outside of Kyiv, the station served as a major transit hub during Pripyat's construction and growth. It also functioned as an important link between Ukraine and Belarus. The stop experienced its busiest day ever, roughly 2 years before the Chernobyl disaster in 1984, when 52 buses passed through in one day while traveling along 14 different routes. It closed abruptly after the nuclear accident and before the mass evacuation took place. When the evacuation took place, it was done using buses from elsewhere due to concerns about nearby buses being contaminated with dangerously high levels of radiation. The buses that came to pick up Pripyat's residents formed a line nearly 16 miles long, and in less than 3 hours, each and every remaining inhabitant who hadn't found some other way to leave Pripyat was on a bus and on their way out of the city. Like the rest of Pripyat, the station has remained shuttered since the evacuation. Today, the station's interior still features a map of bus routes that once crossed through the area. The building is filled with crumbling ticket counters and empty lockers, and its walls are covered with peeling wallpaper and cracked paint. It will never reopen, which means that it will only continue to deteriorate until or unless it's eventually torn down. 7. Abandoned bus blocks the road. While driving down a remote road in Kent, England, in the dead of night in 2022, a motorist encountered an abandoned bus parked horizontally across the road. The bus was blocking traffic from passing through. The bizarre sight was captured by the driver's dashcam during his drive home from work, which suggests that he'd traveled this route before and didn't run into this problem. In the video, a van could be seen approaching the bus from the other side of the road and doing a U-turn. The driver who captured the clip theorized that the bus got stuck while trying to maneuver onto the narrow road from a side street. With no other options, the motorist did a U-turn and took another route home. He told Kent Online that he didn't call emergency services, but a police spokesperson confirmed to the newspaper that they'd responded to a call about a single vehicle accident along the road that night. And while that solved the mystery, it did little to make the discovery seem less eerie. What would you do if this happened to you? Tell us in the comments below and hit that subscribe button while you're at it. 6. China's elevated bus. The concept of an elevated bus that straddles the roadway and carries commuters over traffic dates at least as far back as the 1960s. But it hasn't come to fruition yet, although some countries have experimented with the idea. In the early 2000s, plans were made for a prototype to be designed and built in Beijing's Montugao district, with an original due date of 2010. But the project met with numerous delays and eventually fell through. A pilot project was slated to begin with the development of a prototype in Quihangdao by mid-2016. The cities of Nanyang, Shenyang, Tianjin, and Zhuhai also signed on to the pilot project. A 72-foot-long prototype, known as the Transit Elevated Bus, was unveiled that year in Qinghangdao as planned. Its test run in the city was met with high praise, with critics lauding the innovative new vehicle as a groundbreaking new way of getting people from point A to point B without disrupting traffic on the road. But it didn't quite work out as planned, and it wasn't long before experts were questioning the viability of the project. They wondered how much weight the vehicle was actually capable of carrying, how long its battery would last, and how it would maneuver around corners and fit beneath pedestrian bridges. The project took another downturn in early 2017, when several of the people involved were arrested on suspicion of investment fraud. 4 months, the prototype sat on its testing track in the city gathering dust. It was finally dismantled and removed in July of that year. Other municipalities, including the Brazilian city of Manaus, have toyed with the idea of developing a straddling bus. But these ideas have all failed to come to fruition, and for now the concept remains little more than an imaginary vision. 5. Tottenville Bus Graveyard. Most people think of New York City as a bustling, thriving metropolis that lives up to its ultra-modern reputation in almost every way. But if you travel to the very last stop along the Staten Island Railroad, you'll discover a surprisingly quiet, suburban-esque part of the Big Apple that's not featured in brochures or part of any guided tours. If you venture away from the station and a little further into the Tottenville neighborhood, you may come across a graveyard filled with decades-old buses that once transported commuters in much busier parts of the city. A writer from the abandoned NYC website wrote about the collection of dilapidated buses in 2017. They declined to say exactly where the property is located out of respect for the owner, who doesn't sound too keen on welcoming explorers onto the site. In fact, the explorer received a stern warning from the neighbor, who cautioned them against trespassing onto the property. The buses, which reportedly date as far back as the 1960s, appear extremely worn and graffiti-covered in photos that the blogger shared. While it's unclear whether they're still at the site, the writer revealed one key clue about their location, stating that the vehicles were found near a deserted industrial area known as Sharad Shoreline, where old bricks imprinted with the names of their manufacturers still litter the ground. 4. Cork Abandoned Bus Graveyard. In West Cork, Ireland, there's a bus graveyard filled with hundreds of old, rusting buses from all over Ireland and the United Kingdom. Very few people even knew the site existed until recent years, when it appeared on the abandoned West Cork Instagram page. Even then, the person who posted the photos kept the exact location of the graveyard a secret because it's on private property. The images on AWC's page were accompanied by a caption explaining that there were around 260 abandoned buses at the site, along with 20 or so fire engines. And despite having insider intel on the property, the account holder was so fascinated with the bus graveyard that they took hundreds of pictures, which show row upon row of disused commuter buses, double-decker tour buses, and even some work vehicles. They're in various states of disrepair. Some have shattered windshields and are covered in rust, while others are in slightly better shape. Most of the buses appear to be mostly gutted of their interior furnishings, and some have holes in the roof and are falling apart to the point where their suspensions have given way and their bumpers are resting on the ground. 3. Bus Garage Number 7. In a residential area on the outskirts of Kyiv, Ukraine, there's a UFO-shaped Soviet-era building known simply as Bus Garage Number 7. It's filled with colorful, rusting Volvo buses from before the Iron Curtain fell, offering a rare glimpse into daily life in the Eastern Bloc. Construction on the garage began in 1973, according to a former employee who spoke to CNN Travel in 2019. It took 8 years to build the intergalactic-looking station, which the former worker described as the most beautiful bus park in Ukraine and Europe at the time. The building's roof was suspended by 180 steel cables, which were attached to a column in the center. Bus Garage Number 7 serviced various international routes throughout Eastern Europe, including to and from Moldova, Czechoslovakia, Germany, and Poland. During the Chernobyl nuclear power plant disaster in 1986, more than 70 buses were dispatched from the station to evacuate residents from the city of Pripyat. Some of the buses never returned because they absorbed too much radiation to continue operating safely, and instead ended up at designated graveyards for contaminated vehicles. All the station's international routes were cancelled when the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991. Around the same time, Ukraine descended into a financial crisis that lasted for years to come, and the bus activity decreased even more. With no money to replace the aging buses, most of the remaining domestic routes were cancelled in 2005. The station officially closed in 2015, but by then, activity there had nearly completely ground to a halt. Today, the effects of time and neglect are evident as the overgrown, seemingly post-apocalyptic station falls further into disrepair. 2. Buster, the abandoned bus dog. In 2016, an adorable Staffordshire Terrier was found alone on a London bus. The pup was so distressed that he refused to move, even when concerned passengers tried to coax him away from the seat he was left to fend for himself in. He spent the night planted firmly in place, but he couldn't stay there forever. People were quick to assume that the dog, whom they nicknamed Buster, had been abandoned by a negligent owner, but that turned out not to be the case at all. He had a loving family who had unintentionally become separated from him. It's unclear how this happened, but Buster's guardians certainly didn't dump him off like it seemed at first. They told the press that they took him outside and he disappeared in just a split second. Household members searched frantically for their beloved canine companion, but couldn't find him anywhere. The family became worried sick about their dog and began to fear that they would never see him again. When news about him being spotted on the bus began to circulate, they were overjoyed to the point of tears. The two parties were soon reunited, and Buster, whose real name is Boston, was back in the comfort and safety of his home. 1. Rotherham Bus Depot. Located in South Yorkshire, England, the old market town of Rotherham is home to an abandoned first bus depot that looks much older than it actually is. Built in 1982, the 183,000 square foot site housed cleaning and maintenance facilities, as well as offices and a cafeteria for drivers, administrative staff and employees. During its heyday, the depot housed 80 buses and accommodated around 230 drivers. Plans to close the property were first announced in 2016 when it became too large for the company's needs. It closed the following year and has remained abandoned ever since. Today, the facility is under the care and ownership of the South Yorkshire Mayoral Combined Authority, or SYMCA. But it's reportedly more of an inconvenience to its new owner than anything else, and has been plagued by theft and vandalism ever since its abandonment in 2017. While there appear to be no actual buses inside, it's not hard to tell what the building was once used for. What was once a repair shop is now filled with the crumbling remnants of bus repair bays, while another area contains bus cleaning machines and other maintenance supplies. There's a bus mural on one of the garage walls, and old offices filled with chairs and other items that were left behind. The ongoing issues with the disused site have racked up annual security and maintenance bills to the tune of 6 figures, making the depot a lot more expensive than it's worth. It has a handful of uses, including as a police firearms training facility, where urban explorers have found spent shell casings, as well as a COVID testing site. In early 2022, after years of failing to lease the property, SYMCA announced plans to sell it, regardless of whether or not doing so will require the demolition of the structure that's currently in place. For now, it remains standing, but if things go the owner's way, it'll be someone else's problem in the near future. Thanks for watching. Which one of these abandoned bus stories was the most strange to you? Tell us in the comments below and don't forget to subscribe. See you next time. Bye.